Hello friend, welcome to Science for Sleep. Tonight, we're going to spend some time beneath the surface, in the quiet world of roots. Most people notice the part of a plant that rises into the air. We see trunks, stems, leaves, flowers and fruit. We watch branches move in the wind. We notice the colors of petals, the shape of a tree, or the size of a garden. But much of a plant's real life begins in darkness, hidden below our feet. That hidden half is easy to forget because we almost never see it. Soil covers it, grass hides it, forest floors keep it out of sight. Even in our own gardens, we usually only think about roots when we pull up a weed or lift a carrot from the ground. But roots are not simple leftovers attached to the bottom of a plant. They are living structures, always growing, always responding, and always helping support the world above them. In many ways, roots are one of the most important parts of a plant. A tree may look tall and complete above the ground, but a huge part of its reach exists below the surface. The visible part may catch the eye, but the hidden part is what anchors, gathers, stores, and quietly keeps the whole living system going. Without roots, many plants would have no steady way to drink, no firm hold in the soil, and no safe foundation to keep growing. And roots are far more surprising than they first seem. A root can sense gravity and begin growing downward without a brain, without eyes, and without any kind of nervous system. A young root does not need sunlight to show it the way. It enters the soil in darkness and still responds to the pull of the earth, slowly finding its direction. There is something deeply strange and beautiful about that. A silent structure, hidden in the ground, somehow knowing where down is. The finest parts of a root system are also some of the most important. When people imagine roots, they often picture thicker strands spreading through the soil like branching ropes. But much of the real work is done by tiny root hairs, so small they are easy to miss. These delicate structures help plants gather water and minerals from the spaces between bits of soil. So even when a root system looks simple from far away, it may actually be made of countless tiny working parts. Roots also do not live alone. Beneath forests, fields, gardens, and even cracks in city soil, roots often live in close partnership with fungi. These relationships can help plants reach water and nutrients that would otherwise be difficult to gather. In return, the plant shares energy it has made above ground. So the underground world is not just filled with roots. It is filled with exchange, support, and quiet cooperation, all taking place where no one can see it. And roots do more than help individual plants survive. They can shape the land itself. Roots help hold soil in place. They can slow erosion, steady hillsides, support riverbanks, and help keep the ground from washing away during rain. Over time, roots can even press into tiny cracks, move through hard spaces, and change the structure of the world around them with slow and steady force. What seems still is often active. What seems simple is often powerful. That may be one of the most calming things about roots. They do not rush. They do not announce themselves. They do not ask to be seen. And yet they are always at work, below the surface, supporting more life than most of us ever stop to imagine. So tonight, as we settle into this hidden world together, roots may begin to feel less like ordinary plant parts and more like one of nature's quiet wonders. They are hidden yet essential. Still, yet always moving. And once we begin looking more closely, a simple question starts to grow. What exactly is a root? That question sounds simple at first. Most people would probably say that a root is just the part of a plant that grows underground. And while that is often true, it is not the whole story. A root is more than a buried plant part. It has its own structure, its own purpose, and its own way of living. A root is a plant organ. In biology, an organ is a part of a living thing that performs certain jobs. In animals, organs include things like the heart or lungs. In plants, organs include leaves, stems, flowers, and roots. Each one has its own role. Leaves are built to capture light. Stems lift and connect. Flowers help with reproduction. Roots, meanwhile, are mostly built to anchor the plant, absorb water and minerals, store food, and connect the hidden part of the plant to the rest of its body. That may sound straightforward, but roots are not always easy to define just by where they are found. Many roots do grow underground, but not everything underground is a root. Some underground plant parts are actually stems. A potato, for example, is not a root. It is a tuber, which is a swollen underground stem. Ginger is also not a root, even though many people call it ginger root. It is a rhizome, which is another kind of underground stem. These parts may hide below the surface, but they are built differently and do different jobs. A true root usually does not have leaves, flower buds, or the small joint-like points called nodes that stems often have. A stem is divided into sections, and from those sections, new leaves or branches can grow. Roots usually do not work that way. They branch, but their branching follows a different pattern. Their surface and inner structure are also different from stems, even when both are hidden in the ground. There are also roots that do not stay underground at all. Some plants grow aerial roots that hang in the air. Others grow roots that cling to bark, stone, or walls. In swamps, certain trees send roots upward out of the mud so they can take in oxygen. So while roots are often underground, being underground is not what makes them roots. What makes them roots is how they are built and what they do. One of the main jobs of a root is anchoring. A plant needs a steady hold in the place where it grows. Even a small weed in a sidewalk crack depends on its roots to stay in place. A taller plant, like a sunflower or tree, depends on roots even more. Wind, rain, loose soil, and changing weather all put pressure on plants. Roots help resist that pressure. They give the plant grip and stability. Another major job is absorption. Roots take in water from the soil, along with dissolved minerals the plant needs in order to live. These include nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. The plant cannot simply make these on its own. They must be gathered from the world around it. That makes roots the plant's main point of contact with the ground. Roots can also store energy. Some plants send sugars down into their roots and keep them there for later use. This helps them survive difficult seasons and return to growth when conditions improve. In this way, roots are not just for holding and drinking. They can also be places of saving and preparation. And roots are always connected to the rest of the plant. They are not separate creatures underground. They are part of one living system. Water taken in by roots can move upward through the plant. Sugars made in leaves can move downward into roots. Signals also pass between below ground and above ground parts. So a root is not just something attached to a plant. It is one part of the plant's full body, always linked to what happens above. The more closely roots are defined, the more interesting they become. They are not just buried support structures. They are active organs with their own form and function, shaped by millions of years of plant life on Earth. And once that becomes clear, another question begins to take shape. If roots are such essential parts of a plant, when do they first appear? In the life of a new plant, what comes first out of the seed and into the world? Before a plant becomes tall enough to cast shade or bright enough to catch the eye, it begins as something small and quiet. A seed can look still, dry, and almost lifeless from the outside. It may rest in soil for days, weeks, months, or even longer, waiting for the right conditions. And yet, inside that small shell is the beginning of a new plant, folded into a tiny package with remarkable care. A seed contains an embryo, which is the young plant in its earliest form. It also often contains stored food to support that early growth. When conditions are right, usually with enough moisture, suitable temperature, and sometimes the right amount of light or darkness, the seed begins to wake. It absorbs water, softens, and starts the slow process of germination. One of the most important moments in that process is also one of the least visible. In many plants, the first structure to emerge from the seed is the embryonic root. This first root is called the radicle. Before the stem rises, before leaves unfold, before the plant begins reaching toward the light, the radicle begins reaching into the soil. That order tells us something important. For a young plant, getting rooted comes first. This early root gives the seedling its first anchor. A newly sprouted plant is extremely fragile. It is small, soft, and easily disturbed. Rain can move soil around it. Wind can shake it. Dryness can end its life before it truly begins. By sending out a root first, the plant begins to secure itself in place. It creates a hold in the world before trying to lift new growth into the air. The first root also begins the plant's relationship with water. A seed contains some stored energy, but it cannot live on that for long. Once growth begins, the young plant needs access to moisture from outside itself. The radicle is the first tool that allows this to happen. As it enters the soil, it starts taking in water and preparing the plant for further development. At the same time, that first root begins making contact with the physical world around it. Soil is not smooth or empty. It is made of particles, air pockets, bits of organic matter, moisture, and tiny living things. The radicle moves into this uneven space and begins responding to it. Even at this early stage, the plant is no longer isolated inside a seed. It is becoming part of a larger environment. The timing of this stage can be a matter of survival. If a seed germinates but fails to root well, it may not last long. In dry conditions, a plant may need quick access to moisture. In loose soil, it may need anchoring before it is displaced. In crowded areas, it may need to establish itself before nearby plants take too much of the available water and nutrients. So although germination can sound gentle and peaceful, it is also a race against time. The first root is usually simple, compared with the more developed root systems that will come later. It is just the beginning. Over time, it may branch, thicken, or become part of a wider network depending on the kind of plant. In some species, this first root becomes the main root, growing deeper and forming the basis of a taproot system. In others, it may be joined or replaced by many other roots as the plant develops. But no matter what shape the future system takes, the first root is the plant's opening move underground. There is something almost poetic about that. When a new plant begins, it does not first rise into the sky. It first goes down. Before it can spread leaves in sunlight, it must enter darkness. Before it becomes visible, it must build support in the unseen world below. This is one of the quiet patterns that appears again and again in nature. So much of life depends on what happens before anything is visible. The flower depends on the stem. The stem depends on the root. And the root begins with a small, pale structure emerging from a seed and pressing into the ground. It is easy to overlook how strange that really is. A root begins in darkness and still knows where to go. It does not drift in random directions. It usually grows downward, steadily moving into the earth as though it can sense what lies below. And that leads to one of the most fascinating questions of all. How does a root, with no eyes and no brain, know which way is down? A young root enters the soil without sight, without sound, and without any kind of map. It does not think about where it is going. It does not choose a path the way an animal might. And yet, in most cases, it still moves in a steady direction. It grows downward into the earth, as if it somehow knows where down is. This ability is one of the most surprising things about roots. The process is called gravitropism. That word simply means growth in response to gravity. A root is able to detect the pull of the earth and adjust its growth so that it moves in that direction. This does not happen because the root is pulled down, like a rope being dropped. It happens because the root is alive, sensitive, and able to respond to conditions around it. Much of this sensing happens near the root tip. Inside that small growing region are special cells that help the plant detect direction. Within some of those cells are tiny, dense structures that shift with gravity. As they settle, they help the plant sense which side is lower. This leads to changes in how the root grows. Cells on one side may lengthen differently than cells on the other side, causing the root to bend and guide itself downward. So the root does not need a brain to know where to go. It only needs living tissues that can sense physical forces and respond through growth. That response is slow, but it is steady. A root does not turn all at once. It does not twist sharply like a worm or snake. Instead, it changes direction little by little as new cells grow and older cells stretch. If a seed is turned sideways in the soil, the root can curve until it is once again growing downward. If the seed is upside down, the same thing happens. The plant quietly corrects itself. Gravity is not the only guide though. Roots also respond to moisture. This is called hydrotropism, which means growth in response to water. If one area of soil is wetter than another, roots may grow toward the place where water is more available. This makes sense because water is one of the most important things a plant must gather in order to live. In real soil, a root is not responding to only one signal at a time. It may be sensing gravity, moisture, air spaces, nutrients, pressure, and obstacles all at once. That makes the underground journey more complicated than it may first seem. Soil is not open space. It is crowded with particles, cracks, bits of decaying material, tiny pockets of air, living microbes, stones, and sometimes the roots of other plants. A growing root must move through this uneven world slowly and carefully. When it meets resistance, it may bend. When it finds a small opening, it may follow it. When part of the soil is too compacted, it may branch away or redirect its growth. In this way, a root's path is not a straight line. It is more like a quiet negotiation with the ground. The root tip is especially important in that process because it is the leading edge. It pushes into the unknown first. But it is also delicate, which is why it is protected by a root cap. This small covering helps shield the tip as it moves through rough soil. As the tip advances, new cells are formed behind it, then stretch and help extend the root farther forward. All of this happens in darkness. That may be one of the most calming and strange parts of the story. Roots do not need light to begin their work. While stems and leaves rise toward brightness, roots enter the hidden world below. Their path is guided by forces and signals that do not depend on sight at all. And even though the movement is slow, it is not passive. A root is constantly sensing and responding. It is adjusting to gravity, to water, to pressure, and to the changing shape of the soil around it. What looks still from the outside is actually full of motion on a very quiet scale. The deeper we look, the more a root begins to seem less like a simple strand and more like a living explorer. Not fast, not dramatic, but persistent, careful, and responsive every step of the way. And that quiet responsiveness depends on something very small. Because the real work of root growth is happening in tiny structures near the tip, in parts of the root so fine and delicate that most of us never stop to imagine them at all. When people picture roots, they often imagine long brown strands spreading through the soil like ropes. That image is not completely wrong, but it leaves out the most delicate and important parts. The real work of root growth happens in places so small that they are easy to overlook. A root is not just a single line pushing into the ground. It is a living structure with specialized parts, each helping it grow, sense, and gather what the plant needs. At the very end of a growing root is the root tip. This is the leading edge, the part that meets the soil first. The tip is where new growth begins. As the root moves forward, it is the tip that enters new spaces, presses past grains of soil, and responds to the conditions around it. Even though the whole root may seem like one object, the tip is the most active and sensitive part of the journey. Because the tip is so important, it also needs protection. Covering the end of the root is a small structure called the root cap. This cap acts like a shield. Soil may look soft from above, but up close it is made of countless hard particles and rough surfaces. As the root pushes through that world, the cap helps protect the delicate tissues just behind it. Cells in the outer part of the cap wear away over time, but new ones are constantly produced, so the root can keep moving safely forward. Just behind the root cap is a region where cells are actively dividing. This is where new cells are made. It is one of the quiet engines of root growth. The plant does not grow because older cells simply stretch forever. It grows because new cells are being created near the tip. Behind that dividing region is another zone where the new cells begin to lengthen. As they stretch, they push the root farther into the soil. So root growth is really a careful sequence. First, cells are made. Then they lengthen. Then they mature into different tissues with different jobs. Some become part of the outer layer. Some become transport tissue. Some become part of the central structure that connects the root to the rest of the plant. In this way, the root is being built as it moves. One of the most remarkable features of this growing structure is the root hair. Root hairs are tiny, thin extensions from certain cells near the outer surface of the root. They are far smaller than the thicker root branches people usually imagine. In many ways, they look less like hairs in the animal sense, and more like fine threads or tubes reaching into the spaces between soil particles. Their job is extremely important. Root hairs greatly increase the surface area of the root. That means they give the plant much more contact with the soil around it. More contact means more chances to absorb water and dissolve minerals. Without this fine covering of tiny structures, a root would have far less access to the resources in the ground. This is one of the hidden secrets of plant life. The thicker roots may provide structure and transport, but the finest parts often do much of the gathering. A plant depends heavily on these tiny root hairs, even though they are almost invisible without close study. They are short-lived and delicate, but while they last, they play a major role in helping the root do its work. The area where root hairs form is not the very tip itself. That is important. If the hairs formed right at the front, they would be scraped away as the root pushed forward. Instead, they appear a little farther back, in parts of the root that have already passed through the soil enough to begin settling into place. That arrangement allows the tip to keep advancing, while the root hairs behind it begin absorbing from the surrounding ground. This fine architecture also helps explain why roots are so effective without seeming dramatic. A root does not need to rush through the earth. It works through careful design. Protection at the tip, new cells forming behind it, tissues stretching and maturing, and countless fine hairs increasing contact with the soil. All of it happens quietly, and all of it supports the life of the plant above. The deeper we look, the less simple a root seems. What first looked like a single underground strand turns out to be a carefully organized living system, built for movement, sensing, and exchange. And that exchange is the next part of the story. Because once roots have grown into the soil and spread their fine structures through it, they begin one of their most important tasks of all. They begin to drink. Soil can look quiet from above. It lies still beneath grass, gardens, forests, and fields, giving very little sign of the movement happening inside it. But around roots, soil is never truly still. Water moves through tiny spaces. Air drifts between particles. Minerals dissolve and shift. Countless living things feed, grow, and break down what has fallen into the ground. And through all of this, roots take part in a slow and constant exchange. To understand roots more clearly, it helps to stop thinking of soil as plain dirt. Soil is much more than that. It is a mixture of crushed rock, tiny mineral grains, old plant matter, water, air, and living organisms. Some soils are sandy and loose. Some are rich and dark. Some are packed tightly with clay. Some hold water easily, while others let it drain away quickly. A root entering the soil is not entering one simple substance. It is entering a changing environment full of structure and difference. One of the most important things roots gather from that environment is water. Plants need water for nearly everything they do. Water helps keep their tissues firm. It moves substances from one place to another. It supports photosynthesis in the leaves. It also helps cool the plant when water escapes through tiny openings in leaves and moves into the air. Without a steady supply of water, a plant cannot continue its normal life for long. Roots take in water through their thin outer surfaces, especially in the younger parts of the root and around the root hairs. Water moves from the soil into the root because of differences in concentration and pressure. In simple terms, it moves from where it is more available to where the plant can pull it inward. This is not like a person drinking through a straw. It is a quieter and more natural process, driven by the properties of water and the living tissues of the plant. But roots do not absorb only water. They also gather dissolved minerals from the soil. These minerals are essential nutrients that plants need in order to grow and function. Nitrogen helps support leaves and proteins. Phosphorus is important for energy movement and growth. Potassium helps regulate important processes inside plant cells. Calcium and magnesium also play important roles in structure and function. These elements are not taken in as dry bits of matter. They are absorbed when dissolved in water moving through the soil. This means that water and minerals are closely linked in the life of a root. A root is not just searching for moisture. It is also gathering the nutrients that moisture carries. The ability of a root to do this depends greatly on the kind of soil around it. In sandy soil, water may move through quickly and not remain available for long. In clay-rich soil, water may stay longer, but air spaces can be fewer, making conditions harder for roots if the ground becomes too wet. In rich, crumbly soil with organic matter, roots often find a balance of moisture, air, and nutrients that support steady growth. So the success of a root is never only about the root itself. It also depends on the place where it grows. Temperature matters too. Cold soil can slow root activity. Very dry soil can make water too difficult to gather. Soil chemistry matters as well, because some nutrients may be present, but locked in forms the plant cannot use easily. Even when the ground seems full of material, a root can only absorb what is actually available and reachable in its immediate surroundings. That is an important part of the story. Roots are powerful, but they are not unlimited. They work with what they can touch. They gather from the spaces they reach. A plant may live in a field, a forest, or a garden full of nutrients. But any one root still depends on its local patch of soil and the conditions within it. There is something calm and beautiful about that quiet dependence. A root does not command the soil. It responds to it. It grows into the spaces it can find, absorbs what is available, and builds the life of the plant little by little from the ground up. And once water and minerals enter the roots, they do not remain there for long. They begin a wider journey, moving through the plant and linking the dark below to the living green world above. Once water and minerals enter the roots, their journey is only beginning. A plant cannot survive if those resources stay below ground. They need to move upward into stems, leaves, flowers, and fruit. At the same time, the parts above ground must send energy back down. So a plant is not made of separate pieces working alone. It is one connected body, always moving materials from place to place in quiet, steady flow. Roots are the entry point for much of what a plant gathers from the soil. Leaves are the main place where sunlight is turned into sugar through photosynthesis. Stems help support the plant and serve as pathways between below ground and above ground parts. All of these structures depend on one another. A root cannot go on living for long without the sugars made in leaves. Leaves cannot stay alive without the water and minerals brought up by roots. This relationship is constant and deeply balanced. Inside a plant are transport tissues that help make this possible. One of them is called xylem. Xylem carries water and dissolved minerals upward from the roots into the rest of the plant. Once the roots have absorbed water from the soil, that water enters these channels and begins moving higher. It can travel through stems into leaves, where it helps support photosynthesis and many other processes. The upward movement of water is not caused by one simple push from below. It depends on several forces working together. Roots can help create pressure, but much of the pull comes from the leaves. As water leaves the plant through tiny openings in the leaves, more water is drawn upward to replace it. This creates a continuous movement from soil to root to stem to leaf. So even though roots are hidden underground, they are part of a much larger stream running through the plant. Another transport tissue is called phloem. While xylem mostly carries water and minerals upward, phloem carries sugars and other useful substances from the leaves to the parts of the plant that need them. These sugars are made during photosynthesis when leaves use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to produce energy-rich compounds. Some of that sugar is used right away. Some is moved through the phloem to stems, flowers, fruits, seeds, and roots. This means that roots are not only givers, they are also receivers. A root absorbs water and minerals, but it depends on energy made elsewhere. It cannot capture sunlight for itself. It relies on leaves to do that work. When sugars travel downward through the phloem, they help roots grow, maintain their cells, and carry out the work of absorption. Some of those sugars may also be stored in roots for later use, especially in plants with large storage roots. There is something beautiful about this exchange. The leaves are out in the light, gathering energy from the sky. The roots are down in darkness, gathering water and minerals from the ground. Neither side can fully succeed without the other. The plant lives by connecting these two worlds. Plants also move signals through these same pathways. Hormones, which are chemical messengers, travel from one part of the plant to another and help control growth and response. A root may sense dry soil and send a signal that affects what happens in the leaves. A leaf may produce signals that influence how the roots branch or grow. Injury, stress, changing seasons, and new growth can all involve communication within the plant's body. So when we think of roots, it helps not to picture them as isolated strands underground. They are part of a flowing system, Water comes in through roots and rises upward. Sugars are made in leaves and move downward. Signals pass between regions. Growth in one place affects growth in another. A plant may appear still from the outside, but inside it, movement never really stops. There is no loud machinery, no beating heart, no rushing footsteps. And yet there is transport, exchange, and quiet coordination all the time. The deeper we look, the more a plant begins to feel like a living network rather than a simple object. And even though all roots share this basic role in supporting the whole plant, they do not all take the same form. Different plants solve the problem of living underground in very different ways, and the shapes of their root systems can vary more than most people realize. Once you begin looking more closely, roots stop seeming all the same. At first, it is easy to imagine that every plant simply sends a few roots downward and outward into the soil. But the underground shapes of plants can be very different from one another. Some grow one strong central root. Others spread into a dense web of finer roots. Some stay near the surface. Others reach farther down. And these different designs are not random. They reflect the needs of the plant and the kind of place where it lives. One common kind of root system is the taproot system. A taproot begins with one main root that grows downward more strongly than the others. Smaller side roots branch off from it. This can give the plant a strong central anchor, and in some cases, allow it to reach deeper water in the soil. Plants such as carrots, dandelions, and some trees begin with this kind of pattern. In a carrot, the taproot becomes thick and stores food. But in many other plants, it remains mainly a strong central root with smaller branches extending from it. Another common type is the fibrous root system. Instead of one main root taking control, many roots grow out in a more even pattern, forming a dense network. These roots are often thinner and more spread out, especially in the upper layers of soil. Grasses are a classic example of this kind of system. A lawn, for instance, may look simple above ground, but below it is a thick mesh of fine roots holding the soil together and gathering water from a broad area. These two patterns, taproot and fibrous root systems, help show how different plants solve the same basic problems in different ways. A taproot system may be useful for anchoring and deeper access. A fibrous system may be especially effective at covering a wide area near the surface, quickly taking in rainfall and binding soil tightly in place. But even within those broad categories, there is great variation. Some plants have very shallow roots. This does not mean they are weak. In fact, shallow roots can be extremely effective when water and nutrients are most available near the surface. Many forest trees, for example, keep a large part of their root system in the upper soil layers, where oxygen is easier to find and where fallen leaves enrich the ground with nutrients over time. In those cases, spreading wide may matter more than going deep. Other plants may push farther downward, especially in dry places where water is harder to find near the surface. In such conditions, depth can offer a major advantage. A plant that can reach moisture stored deeper in the soil may survive when others cannot. Some desert plants combine both strategies, sending roots wide to catch brief rain near the surface, while also reaching down where deeper water may remain longer. Root systems also reflect how plants live above ground. A tall plant facing wind may need strong anchoring. A fast-growing annual plant may focus on quick absorption rather than long-term structure. A crop plant in a field may be shaped by breeding, soil conditions, and the way humans cultivate it. A tree in a crowded forest may develop differently from the same species growing alone in open land. Even closely related plants can form somewhat different root systems depending on where they grow. Soil type matters, moisture matters, competition matters. So a root system is shaped not only by the plant species, but also by its local environment. The underground world is flexible. It responds to opportunity and pressure. This is one reason roots are so interesting. They do not follow one single design. They are more like quiet solutions to life's practical problems. How do you stay in place? How do you gather enough water? How do you survive dry weather? How do you compete with nearby plants? Different root systems are different answers to those questions. Above ground, many plants can look more different than they really are. One may be tall, another short. One may have flowers, another only leaves. But below ground, their root systems often reveal even more about how they live. A plant's underground form is a kind of hidden biography. It tells a story about survival, place, and strategy. And some roots do more than anchor a plant and gather what it needs in the present. In certain plants, roots also become places of storage, quietly holding energy for future growth, future hardship, and the return of life when the right season comes again. A root is often thought of as a structure for anchoring and absorbing. It holds the plant in place and gathers water and minerals from the soil. But in some plants, a root also takes on another role. It becomes a place of storage, a quiet reserve where energy is kept for the future. This stored energy usually comes in the form of sugars and starches made by the plant above ground. Leaves capture sunlight and use it to produce food through photosynthesis. Some of that food is used right away for growth and repair. Some is sent downward and stored below the surface. When a root becomes swollen with these stored resources, it turns into something more than a simple underground support. It becomes a living pantry. Many familiar foods come from this kind of root storage. Carrots are a well-known example. So are beets, radishes, and turnips. In each case, what people pull from the ground and eat is a structure holding energy that the plant has saved. It is easy to forget, when looking at a carrot on a kitchen counter, that it was once part of a living system, quietly gathering light above ground and storing the results below. Sweet potatoes are another example people often think of as a root. And in that case, the storage organ really is a modified root. Potatoes, by contrast, are not roots at all, even though they also store food underground. A potato is a stem tuber. That difference may sound technical, but it reminds us again that underground plant parts can look similar while belonging to different categories. Still, whether the storage organ is a root or a stem, the purpose is much the same. The plant is saving energy where it can protect it. Why does a plant do this? One reason is survival. Conditions above ground are not always friendly. Winter may come. Drought may arrive. Animals may eat the leaves. Fire, cold, or seasonal change may destroy much of the visible plant. If the plant has stored food below ground, it may be able to survive that loss and begin again when conditions improve. The hidden reserve allows life to continue even when the upper part disappears for a time. This is especially useful for plants that live through changing seasons. A plant may grow leaves and flowers during the warmer part of the year, capture sunlight, and send extra energy downward. Then, when cold weather arrives and above-ground growth dies back, the root remains in the soil with its stored food. When warmth returns, the plant can use those reserves to send up new shoots, leaves, and flowers. So the root becomes a bridge between seasons. Storage roots also help young growth begin more quickly. A plant with energy already saved below ground has a head start. It does not need to begin each season with nothing. It can draw on what it stored earlier. This can make a huge difference in survival and timing. In nature, timing matters. A plant that can leaf out early, flower sooner, or recover quickly may have an advantage. There is something calming about the idea of a plant preparing in silence. While leaves are out in the light, the root below is slowly becoming a reserve for future need. It is an act of patience. The plant is not only living in the present moment, it is also storing for what may come later. These storage roots have also mattered greatly to human life. Across many cultures and climates, root crops have been important foods because they are rich in stored energy. They can often be harvested in large numbers, and many keep well after being pulled from the ground. In difficult times, stored roots have helped sustain communities. In everyday life, they have become ordinary parts of meals, so familiar that their deeper story is easy to miss. When people eat a carrot, beet, or turnip, they are eating a survival strategy. They are eating the plant's quiet savings. That gives root vegetables a kind of hidden dignity. They are simple, humble foods, but they represent careful preparation below the soil. And that same hidden strength appears in another way as well. Roots do not only help a plant survive, they can help hold the ground itself together. Beneath hillsides, riverbanks, gardens, and forests, roots are doing something larger than feeding a single plant. They are helping keep the land in place. The ground beneath us can feel permanent. A hillside looks steady. A riverbank seems fixed in place. A field appears quiet and settled. But soil is more fragile than it first appears. Wind can lift it. Water can carry it away. Gravity can pull it downhill. A strong storm, a fast-moving stream, or the loss of plant cover can change a landscape much faster than people expect. And one of the main things that helps hold that ground together is the hidden work of roots. Roots do not simply sit in the soil. They move through it, branch through it, and bind it together. As roots grow, they weave around particles of sand, silt, clay, and organic matter. They create a kind of living net. This does not make the ground solid like concrete, but it does make it more stable. Soil held by roots is often much less likely to wash away than bare soil left exposed to rain or wind. This is especially important on slopes. A hillside without roots can be vulnerable. Rainwater flowing downhill may loosen the surface and carry it away bit by bit. Over time, that loss can become serious. In some cases, when soil becomes too wet and unstable, whole sections of ground can slide. Plant roots help reduce that risk by holding the soil in place and helping it resist movement. They are part of the reason many slopes remain stable through changing weather and seasons. Riverbanks are another good example. Water is always shaping the land it touches. Along the edges of rivers and streams, flowing water can wear away the bank, especially after heavy rain or spring melt. But when plants grow there, their roots help grip the soil. Grasses, shrubs, and trees all contribute in different ways. Their roots do not stop all erosion, because rivers are powerful and always changing. But they can slow it down and reduce how quickly the bank disappears. Grass roots are especially impressive in this way. A lawn may not seem very dramatic, but below it can be a dense web of fine roots spreading through the upper soil. In natural grasslands, this network can become extensive and remarkably effective at holding topsoil near the surface. That matters because topsoil is one of the richest and most important parts of the ground for plant life. It is often dark with organic matter and full of nutrients. When topsoil is lost, the land becomes less fertile and less able to support healthy growth. Roots also affect how water moves through the land. When rain falls on bare, compacted ground, water may run quickly across the surface. That runoff can carry soil with it, leading to more erosion. But where roots and healthy soil are present, more water can soak into the ground. Root channels, soil structure, and plant cover all help slow the movement of water. This can reduce runoff and help keep the ground from being stripped away. Forests show this beautifully. Beneath a forest floor, roots from trees, shrubs, and smaller plants spread through layers of soil rich in fallen leaves and organic matter. This underground network helps support the ground itself, while the layer above softens rainfall and slows the movement of water. The whole system works together. Remove too much plant cover, and the soil often becomes far more vulnerable. This is one reason deforestation can have such strong effects on a landscape. When trees and other plants are cut away, their roots eventually die. Once that living support weakens, the soil may become much easier to erode. Rain can wash it into streams. Slopes can become unstable. The land may begin to change in ways that are difficult to reverse. A similar problem can happen after fire, overgrazing, or other forms of disturbance that reduce plant cover and damage root systems. There is something quietly powerful about this. Roots can shape the land without ever being seen. They do not stop storms. They do not command rivers. But by living where they do and growing the way they do, they help steady the skin of the earth. That hidden support also changes how we should picture a plant. A plant is not only the leaves and stems we notice above ground. It is also part of the structure of the land itself. A meadow, a forest, and a riverbank all depend not just on visible growth, but on roots below the surface holding everything together. And when people imagine those roots, they often picture them going deep, straight down into the ground. But the real shape of many root systems, especially in trees, is often much wider and more surprising than that. A large tree can make a person imagine an equally large structure reaching deep into the earth. It seems natural to picture the roots as a kind of mirror of the trunk and branches above, stretching far down into darkness in the same dramatic shape. But the real pattern is often different. Tree roots are usually much wider than people expect, and often much shallower too. This surprises many people because deep roots seem like they would make the most sense. A tall tree faces wind, rain, shifting seasons, and the weight of its own body. It feels as though it should need one enormous anchor going straight down. Some trees do grow deeper roots in certain conditions, especially when young or when soil allows it. But in many cases, a large part of a tree's root system is found in the upper layers of soil. That upper ground is often the best place for roots to work. Oxygen is easier to find there. Water from rain often enters from above. Fallen leaves and other decaying material enrich the surface layers with nutrients. So the richest and most useful zone for many tree roots is not far below the forest floor, but near it. That is where many of the fine absorbing roots do much of their work. This means a tree's underground shape is often more like a broad spread than a deep spike. Roots can extend outward far beyond the edge of the branches above. In some cases, the root system may spread 2 to 3 times wider than the canopy, depending on the species and the conditions. That hidden width helps the tree gather water from a larger area and hold itself more securely in the soil. Not all roots in a tree do the same job. Some are thicker structural roots, built more for support and transport. These help anchor the tree and connect the trunk to the wider root system. Farther out, and often closer to the surface, are many finer roots that do much of the absorbing work. These thinner roots, along with their root hairs and fungal partners, are the parts most active in taking in water and nutrients. So when people imagine tree roots, they often picture the wrong part as the most important. The thick roots near the base may look strongest, but much of the real gathering happens in the finer network farther out. The life of the tree depends not only on its strong base, but on this quiet, delicate reach spreading through the soil. The exact shape of a tree's root system depends on many things. Soil depth matters. If there is shallow bedrock, roots may have little choice but to spread sideways. If the water table is high, deep growth may be limited. If the soil is loose and well drained, roots may behave differently than in compacted or clay-heavy ground. Wind exposure also matters. A tree growing alone in an open field may need a different pattern of support than one growing inside a protected forest. Competition matters too. In a forest, roots often share the same general space as the roots of nearby trees, shrubs, and smaller plants. The underground world can be crowded. Different root systems may overlap, avoid one another, or compete for the same water and nutrients. So a tree is not shaping its root system in empty ground. It is growing among neighbors, obstacles, and changing conditions all the time. This also helps explain why trees can sometimes suffer when the soil around them is disturbed. If much of their active root system is near the surface and spread wide, damage to the soil over a broad area can affect them deeply. Construction, heavy foot traffic, paving, cutting roots, or changing the flow of water can all interrupt the quiet support system a tree depends on. A tree may look strong above ground, while the real problem is hidden below. There is something humbling about that. A forest can look like a world of trunks, branches, and leaves. But just beneath it is another forest, not an exact reflection, but a wide and crowded hidden structure supporting the visible one. It is not usually a world of roots plunging straight down into great depths. It is more often a world of spreading networks, fine absorbing threads, and life concentrated close to the surface where the soil is richest. And even that wide underground reach is only part of the story. A tree's roots are often not working alone. Around them, and sometimes joined closely with them, are fungi that extend the tree's reach even farther, turning the soil into a place of quiet partnership. A tree's roots may seem self-contained at first. They spread through the soil, gather water, absorb minerals, and help hold the plant in place. But underground, roots are often not working alone. Around them, and sometimes joined closely with them, is another form of life that helps extend their reach in remarkable ways. That partner is fungi. Many plants form partnerships with fungi in the soil. These relationships are called mycorrhizae. The word simply refers to a close association between fungi and roots. It is one of the most widespread and important partnerships in the natural world, even though most people never see it happen. Beneath forests, meadows, fields, and gardens, roots and fungi are often living together in quiet cooperation. To understand why this matters, it helps to picture the difference between a root and a fungal thread. Even fine roots are much thicker than many fungal filaments. Fungi grow as tiny thread-like structures called hyphae, and these threads can move into extremely small spaces in the soil. They can slip between particles, reach narrow pockets of moisture, and come into contact with nutrients that roots might not reach easily on their own. This gives the plant an advantage. Through its fungal partner, a root system can effectively extend its reach far beyond its own surface. The fungi help gather water and nutrients from the surrounding soil and bring them into contact with the plant. One important nutrient in this relationship is phosphorus, which plants need, but often struggle to gather efficiently because it can be difficult to access in the soil. Fungal partners can be especially helpful in reaching and transporting it. In return, the plant provides something the fungi need. Fungi do not make sugars from sunlight the way green plants do. The plant, through photosynthesis in its leaves, produces sugars and sends some of that energy downward. In a mycorrhizal partnership, part of that energy is shared with the fungi. So this is not a one-sided arrangement. It is an exchange. The plant offers fuel. The fungi offer reach. There is something deeply calming about the fairness of that relationship. One partner gathers light from above. The other explores the soil below. Each offers what the other cannot easily create alone. These partnerships come in different forms. In some cases, fungal threads wrap around the roots without entering the root cells deeply. In other cases, the fungi grow more closely into root tissues and form an even tighter exchange. The details vary across different groups of plants and fungi, but the basic idea remains the same. Roots and fungi often do better together than apart. This relationship is also ancient. Scientists believe that partnerships like these may have helped early plants live successfully on land long ago. The first plants to move onto land would have faced major challenges. Soil was different. Water was less constant than in the sea. Nutrients were not always easy to gather. A fungal partner may have made that transition easier by helping those early plants reach what they needed. So when roots and fungi work together today, they may be continuing a relationship with very deep roots in time as well as in soil. That idea makes the underground world feel older and more connected than it first seems. A forest floor is not just a place where modern roots happen to grow. It is part of a much longer story of cooperation, adaptation, and shared survival. It is also important to keep this relationship grounded in reality. People sometimes describe underground fungal connections in dramatic ways, as though forests are constantly whispering to themselves like human communities. The truth is quieter, but no less fascinating. Roots and fungi do form living partnerships that shape how plants gather resources and respond to the world. That alone is extraordinary. It does not need to be exaggerated to feel full of wonder. Once roots are seen this way, the soil starts to feel less empty and less lonely. A root is no longer just a plant part moving through dirt. It is part of a relationship. It is part of a quiet exchange happening below the surface every day. And once that becomes clear, another idea begins to emerge. A root is not only receiving help from the world around it, it is also changing that world, releasing substances into the soil and quietly shaping what happens nearby. It is easy to imagine a root as something passive, a plant part simply moving through the soil and taking what it can find. But a living root does more than absorb. As it grows, it also changes the ground around it. The soil near a root is not just a neutral background. It is a place the root is quietly shaping all the time. One of the main ways roots do this is by releasing substances into the soil. These substances are called exudates. The word may sound technical, but the idea is simple. A root does not keep every useful compound locked inside itself. Some materials are released outward into the thin layer of soil around it. These can include sugars, amino acids, organic acids, and other small compounds. That may seem strange at first. Why would a plant send valuable material out into the ground? Part of the answer is that these released compounds help change the root's local environment. Some exudates can affect the chemistry of the soil itself. They may help loosen nutrients from soil particles or change how available certain minerals are to the plant. In that way, the root is not just searching for what is already present. It is also helping shape the conditions that make those materials easier to gather. Roots can also use exudates to influence nearby living things. The soil is full of microbes, especially close to living roots. Some of these microbes are helpful to plants. They may assist with nutrient cycling, protect against harmful organisms, or support healthier growth in other ways. By releasing certain compounds, roots can attract useful microbial partners into the area around them. So the root is not simply surrounded by life by accident. In many cases, it is helping invite that life closer. This makes the soil around a root feel more active and more personal. Two patches of dirt may look the same from above, but around a living root, the chemistry and biology of the soil can begin to shift in subtle ways. The presence of the root changes the place. Roots may also respond to nearby plants. A plant growing alone in open ground is not living in the same conditions as one surrounded by neighbors. In crowded soil, roots may branch differently, spread differently, or change how they invest energy in growth. Some plants compete strongly below ground, trying to gather water and nutrients before nearby plants can reach them. Others may respond more cautiously, adjusting to the presence of roots from their own species or from different species around them. Scientists are still studying many of these interactions, because underground life is difficult to observe directly. But what is already clear is that roots are not inactive strands buried in silence. They are sensitive organs releasing substances, responding to crowding, and influencing the small world around them. That influence is especially important because soil is not just mineral matter. It is also a chemical environment. Tiny changes in acidity, moisture, and available nutrients can affect what happens next. A root can help create those changes. It can alter the balance in its immediate surroundings without ever making a sound or drawing attention. There is something almost gentle about this kind of power. A root does not push the soil aside through force alone. It also works through chemistry, through slow release, and through long contact with the world around it. What looks still from above may be full of quiet adjustment below. This is one reason roots are more interesting than they first appear. They are not only taking part in the underground world, they are helping build it. A root can attract, discourage, alter, and influence, all within the narrow space that surrounds it. And that narrow space matters enormously, because once roots begin changing the soil around themselves, the next question becomes impossible to ignore. Who is actually living in that small zone around the root? How many bacteria, fungi, tiny animals, and other organisms are gathering there in response? The answer is that the region around a root is far from empty. In fact, it is one of the busiest hidden habitats in nature, a crowded and active world surrounding every living root. Around every living root is a small zone where life gathers. It is easy to miss because it lies hidden in the soil. But this narrow region can be one of the busiest habitats in nature. Scientists call it the rhizosphere. The word simply means the area of soil influenced by roots. And once that idea comes into focus, the ground begins to feel far less empty than it first seemed. A root does not grow through lifeless dirt. It grows through a world already filled with tiny organisms. Near the root, many of these organisms become especially active because roots release water, nutrients, and chemical compounds into the surrounding soil. The rhizosphere becomes a place of exchange, where plant life and soil life meet closely and affect one another every day. Among the most important residents of this hidden world are bacteria. These microscopic organisms are far too small to see with the naked eye, but their influence can be enormous. Some bacteria help break down organic matter, releasing nutrients that plants can use. Others help transform nitrogen into forms that are more available in the soil. Still others may protect roots by competing with harmful microbes or by helping stimulate the plant's natural defenses. Fungi are important here too, not only as direct partners in mycorrhizal relationships, but as part of the wider underground community. Some fungi help decompose fallen leaves, dead roots, and other organic material. In doing so, they return nutrients to the soil and help keep the cycle of life moving. Other fungi may compete with plants or even harm them. So the underground world is not purely cooperative. It is a place of help, struggle, balance, and constant change. There are also tiny animals in this zone. Protozoa drift through thin films of water in the soil and feed on bacteria. Nematodes, which are tiny worm-like animals, may feed on microbes, plant tissues, or other small organisms depending on the kind. Small insects and other soil-dwelling creatures move through the ground, eating, burrowing, and reshaping the spaces around roots. Worms help mix the soil and create channels that affect air and water movement. Even though these lives are easy to overlook, together they form a rich and active community. All of this matters because plant health and soil health are closely linked. A healthy root often depends on a healthy rhizosphere. If the community around the root is balanced and active, nutrients may cycle more efficiently. Harmful organisms may be kept in check, and the plant may have a better chance to grow well. But if the soil community is damaged, the root may struggle too. Poor soil is not only about missing minerals. It can also mean a damaged living system. This gives soil a different kind of meaning. It is not just a support for roots. It is more like a neighborhood full of relationships. Some neighbors are helpful. Some are harmful. Many simply take part in the daily movement of matter and energy. And the root sits right in the middle of that activity, influencing it while also depending on it. There is something soothing about realizing how much life is hidden in quiet places. A handful of soil may seem plain, but around a living root, it can contain an extraordinary amount of activity. Bacteria feeding, fungi spreading, tiny animals hunting, nutrients cycling, water moving, and the plant itself slowly growing through it all. None of it is loud. None of it is visible from above. And yet, it is one of the reasons the surface world stays alive. The rhizosphere also reminds us that no plant truly grows alone. Even a single stem in a garden is part of a much larger underground community. Beneath the calm appearance of a flower bed or forest floor is a living crowd, working through processes too small and slow for human senses to notice in ordinary time. Once the underground world is seen this way, roots begin to look less ordinary. And in some plants, the roots themselves become strikingly unusual, taking forms that seem almost invented for very specific problems. Some climb into the air, some spread like wooden walls, and some rise from mud in search of oxygen. Not every root stays hidden in the same quiet way. Some roots remain buried, branching gently through the soil as people might expect. But others take on shapes so unusual that they seem almost designed for very specific challenges. Once these special roots come into view, the underground world begins to feel even more inventive. One example is the aerial root. These roots grow above the ground instead of below it. They can be seen in certain tropical plants, including many orchids, where they may hang freely in the air. At first, that may seem to go against the very idea of a root, but these roots are still performing root-like jobs. They help the plant attach, absorb moisture, and gather resources from the environment around them. In humid places, an aerial root may take in water directly from the air or from rain that settles on surfaces nearby. Some climbing plants also use roots to cling to bark, walls, or stone. These roots are less about gathering from deep soil and more about holding on. They let the plant rise upward toward light, while keeping a steady grip on whatever surface it is growing against. So even when a root leaves the ground, it is still helping solve a practical problem. Another striking form is the prop root. These roots grow down from stems or branches and help support the plant like extra braces. Corn is a familiar example. Its lower stem can produce roots that angle into the soil, helping keep the plant upright In very large plants, such as banyan trees, prop roots may descend from branches high above and eventually thicken into structures that look almost like extra trunks. Over time, they can make one tree seem like a small forest of connected pillars. Then there are buttress roots, which are especially common in some tropical trees. These roots spread outward from the base of the trunk in large, flat, plank-like forms. They can look almost like walls rising from the ground. In shallow tropical soils, where roots may not be able to go very deep, buttress roots help provide stability by widening the base of support. They also help the tree stand firm in wet ground, poor soil, or places where strong winds are common. One of the strangest kinds of roots appears in swamps and mangrove forests. In these wet places, the soil can be low in oxygen because it is soaked with water. Roots buried in such mud may have trouble getting the air they need. Some plants respond by producing special structures called pneumatophores. These are often called breathing roots. They rise upward out of the mud like narrow spikes or small fingers, reaching into the air so the plant can take in oxygen more easily. It is a remarkable solution. When the ground cannot provide enough air, the root system partly escapes the ground. Some plants use roots in even more unusual ways. Parasitic plants, for example, may form special roots that connect directly into another plant. These roots tap into the host and take water and nutrients from it. In a sense, they turn the ordinary job of rooting into a kind of theft. The parasitic plant still depends on a connection below, but instead of gathering from soil alone, it gathers from the living body of another plant. There are also plants with contractile roots, which can slowly pull part of the plant deeper into the soil. This can help place bulbs or similar structures at a safer depth, where temperature and moisture may be more stable. Even though the movement is slow, it shows once again that roots are not fixed or thoughtless shapes. They can take part in careful adjustments over time. What all of these examples show is that roots are not built from one single plan. They are flexible structures shaped by pressure, place, and need. If a plant grows in humid air, roots may rise above the ground. If it needs extra support, roots may brace it from the sides. If mud lacks oxygen, roots may grow upward. If survival depends on another plant, roots may become tools for tapping into it. There is something deeply satisfying about this quiet creativity. Plants do not solve problems with speed or noise. They solve them with form. Over many generations, roots take on the shapes that help life continue. And the more unusual a root looks, the more likely it is responding to a difficult environment. That becomes especially clear in the harshest places of all, where roots must survive drought, salt, cold, flooding, and poor soil, with no easy conditions to rely on. Not all roots grow in deep, soft, forgiving soil. Some must survive in places where water is scarce, where oxygen is hard to find, where salt gathers in the ground, or where the growing season is so short that every moment matters. In these harsher places, roots reveal just how flexible and resourceful plant life can be. Deserts are one of the clearest examples. At first glance, a desert may seem almost empty, but many plants do survive there, and their roots are a large part of the reason why. Some desert plants send roots deep into the ground in search of water stored far below the surface. Others spread their roots widely through the upper layers of soil, ready to catch brief rainfall before it disappears. A short desert storm may last only minutes, so a plant with wide, shallow roots can gather water quickly while it is still there. In some species, both strategies appear together: a broad surface reach for quick rain and deeper roots for longer-term supply. Dryness is only one kind of problem. In wetlands and swamps, the challenge is often the opposite. There may be plenty of water, but too little oxygen in the soaked ground. Roots still need oxygen for their living cells, and when the soil stays flooded, air spaces can disappear. This makes root life much harder. Some wetland plants cope by staying near the surface, where oxygen is easier to find. Others develop special structures like the breathing roots seen in mangroves and certain swamp trees. These help the plant reach air even when the mud below is heavy and waterlogged. Salt is another major challenge. Coastal plants and salt-tolerant plants, called halophytes, live in soils or waters where salt levels would stress many other species. Too much salt can make it difficult for roots to take in water properly and can upset the balance of important processes inside the plant. To survive, salt-tolerant plants may use roots that carefully control what enters, or they may store and manage salt in ways that reduce damage. Their roots are not simply gathering whatever is present. They are living in a place where the chemistry itself is difficult. Cold environments bring another set of limits. In alpine regions and far northern climates, roots may grow in thin soils, over rock, or in ground that freezes for part of the year. Cold slows biological activity. Water may be locked up as ice. Growing seasons can be short, and the soil may remain cold even when the air begins to warm. In such places, roots often work within a narrow window of time. Plants may stay small, close to the ground, and highly efficient. Their roots are shaped by the need to do as much as possible during a brief season. In some places, the problem is not water, salt, or cold, but poor soil. Certain landscapes have soils low in key nutrients, especially phosphorus or nitrogen. In these conditions, roots may depend more heavily on fungal partners, finer branching, or other efficient designs that help them gather what little is available. A plant in rich soil and a plant in poor soil may both be green above ground, but the hidden struggle below is very different. Even moving sand can become part of the challenge. In dunes and dry coastal places, roots may help anchor plants in shifting ground that never stays still for long. In rocky mountain slopes, roots may squeeze into cracks where small amounts of water and organic matter collect. In each case, the root system reflects the kind of hardship that is most common there. That may be the most important idea in all of this. There is no single best root system for every place. A root that works beautifully in a rainy forest might fail in a desert. A root built for swamp mud would not be ideal in dry sand. Roots are shaped by the pressure of place. They become what survival demands. There is something quietly inspiring in that. Roots do not complain about harsh ground. They do not stop because conditions are imperfect. They adapt. They spread wider, reach deeper, grow finer, stay closer to the surface, form new partnerships, or take on unusual shapes. They answer the world they are given. By this point, roots no longer seem like passive strands hidden underground. They feel more like survival tools shaped by drought, flood, salt, cold, and time. And for humans, that hidden strength has mattered for a very long time, because roots have fed us, supported our crops, and shaped the land where we live. By this point, roots may no longer feel like simple plant parts hidden in the soil. They may feel more like quiet survival tools, shaped by place, pressure, and time. And for humans, that hidden strength has mattered for thousands of years. Roots have fed people, supported farming, influenced medicine, and helped shape the way human life settles across the land. One of the clearest ways roots matter to people is through food. Many plants store energy below ground, and humans have learned to rely on those hidden reserves. Carrots, beets, radishes, turnips, parsnips, cassava, and sweet potatoes have all played important roles in different places and cultures. Some of these are true roots. Some are underground storage organs that people casually think of in a similar way. But in every case, they represent the same basic idea. A plant has stored valuable energy below the surface, and humans have learned how to harvest it. That makes roots part of a very old relationship between people and plants. Above-ground crops can fail from storms, animals, or sudden weather shifts. Underground foods often have a different kind of protection. They are hidden. They can sometimes remain safe in the soil longer. In difficult times, that matters. A crop growing below the surface may survive when something above the ground does not. Roots have also helped shape agriculture more broadly. A farmer may see green leaves and healthy stems, but much of a plant's success depends on what is happening below the surface. A crop with weak roots may struggle even if the field looks fine at first. It may not gather enough water during dry weather. It may fail to anchor well in wind. It may not take in enough nutrients to support full growth. So even though roots are easy to forget, agriculture depends on them constantly. This is true in gardens as well. A gardener may water the soil, add compost, loosen the ground, or mulch the surface, all to support healthier roots. People often speak of feeding the plant, but in many cases, they are really feeding the root zone and the life around it. Healthy roots can make the difference between a plant that merely survives and one that grows strong, flowers well, or produces abundant food. Roots also influence how land recovers. In farming, repeated planting can weaken soil if it is not cared for well. But roots from cover crops and other plants can help rebuild structure, reduce erosion, and improve conditions in the ground. Their presence helps protect topsoil, support microbial life, and keep the land more stable between growing seasons. In that way, roots do not only support individual crops, they help support the long-term health of the soil itself. Human life has also been shaped by roots through medicine and traditional healing. Many cultures have used roots from herbs and other plants for generations. Ginseng, ginger, licorice root, valerian root, and dandelion root are just a few examples of plants whose underground parts have been valued in different traditions. Sometimes the root was prepared as a tea, sometimes dried and ground, sometimes used fresh. Long before modern laboratories, people were already paying attention to the special qualities found below the soil. This does not mean every traditional use was always correct or fully understood, but it does show something important. People noticed that roots were not just hidden supports. They were powerful, useful, and worth gathering. Over time, roots became part of cooking, healing, trade, and daily life. There is something fitting about that. Human beings, like plants, often depend on hidden systems more than visible ones. A meal may begin with something pulled from the ground. A healthy field may depend on roots no one sees. A hillside may remain stable because of roots quietly holding it together beneath grasses and trees. Again and again, roots support the visible world without asking for attention. In some places, entire communities have depended on root crops for survival. Cassava, for example, has been especially important in tropical regions because it can grow in difficult conditions and provide a rich source of calories. Sweet potatoes have supported large populations in many parts of the world. Even humble root vegetables in cooler climates have long been valuable because they can store well and provide food through winter months. So roots have not only fed isolated individuals, they have helped feed societies. The deeper this story goes, the clearer it becomes that roots matter to human life in both practical and quiet ways. They support food, farming, medicine, and the health of the land. They are hidden, yet they shape daily life more than many people realize. And over time, roots came to mean more than something botanical. People began using the word in a much broader way, speaking of roots as a symbol of ancestry, belonging, stability, and the deeper connections that hold a life in place. It is no accident that people use the word roots in so many emotional and cultural ways. A root suggests origin, connection, stability, and something deeper than what appears on the surface. Even people who know very little about plant biology still understand, almost instinctively, what the image of a root means. It points to the hidden support beneath visible life. It suggests that what holds something up is often buried, quiet, and easy to overlook. In everyday language, people often use roots to talk about ancestry. Someone may speak of their family roots, their cultural roots, or their roots in a certain town, region, or country. In those moments, the word is doing more than naming a plant part. It is describing where a person comes from, what shaped them early, and what connects them to a larger history. Just as a plant begins in one place and draws life from what lies below, a person also grows from a background that existed before they were fully aware of it. That is part of why the image feels so natural. Roots are hidden, but they are not unimportant. In fact, they are often the very reason something can continue standing at all. The same idea appears in human life. Much of what shapes a person may not be obvious at first glance. Values, memories, family stories, language, community, and place can all act like roots. They may be out of sight, but they still help support identity. People also speak of putting down roots when they settle somewhere and begin building a life. That phrase suggests more than simply moving into a house. It implies becoming connected to a place in a lasting way. It means forming ties, building routines, creating memories, and beginning to belong. A person who has put down roots is no longer just passing through. They have become part of the life of that place, much as a plant becomes part of the soil where it grows. There is something peaceful in that image. Roots do not wander once they have taken hold. They spread, deepen, and strengthen their connection over time. So when people use the same language for themselves, it reflects a human desire for steadiness, belonging, and continuity. Many cultural traditions have also linked roots with endurance. A root can survive through hardship. It may remain alive underground during cold weather, drought, or damage above the surface. Then, when conditions improve, it helps life begin again. Because of this, roots often symbolize hidden strength, patience, and survival. They suggest a kind of resilience that does not always show itself loudly. A root does not boast. It simply holds on and keeps going. This may be why roots appear so often in stories, sayings, and symbols. Human beings seem drawn to the idea that what matters most is not always visible. A great tree depends on what lies below. A family depends on older generations that came before. A community depends on bonds of trust, memory, and care that are not always obvious from the outside. Again and again, the image of roots helps express that truth. Language itself even uses the idea of roots in another way. In grammar and word history, the root of a word is its basic form, the core meaning from which other forms grow. That is a different subject from plant roots, but it is not a random use of the word. Once again, root means origin. It means the starting point, the underlying part, the thing from which visible complexity develops. Even in language, roots are what come first and support what follows. There is also an emotional side to this metaphor that people return to often. Someone who feels disconnected may say they feel uprooted. A person searching for identity may speak of trying to reconnect with their roots. These expressions work because uprooting is powerful in both plant life and human life. To be uprooted is to lose support, place, and familiarity. To return to one's roots is to return to something grounding. So the symbolism of roots is not accidental at all. It grows directly from what roots actually are. They are supportive. They are hidden. They are connected to nourishment, stability, and survival. Human thought simply borrowed that pattern from nature and turned it into metaphor. And yet, from a human point of view, roots are not always gentle symbols of belonging and strength. Sometimes the same quiet force that anchors a tree and holds a hillside together can also press into stone, lift pavement, and challenge the structures people build. Roots are patient, but they are also persistent. Given enough time, they can press into gaps, follow moisture, lift surfaces, and reshape places humans once thought were fixed. This is one of the reasons roots can feel so powerful. The same structures that anchor plants and protect the soil can also create trouble when they meet roads, pipes, walls, and carefully planned spaces. One familiar example is a sidewalk lifted by tree roots. A flat surface may remain smooth for years, then slowly begin to rise or crack in one spot. At first, the change may seem minor, just a slight bump or uneven line. But over time, roots growing beneath the surface can push upward with enough force to move concrete, stone, or pavement. The process is usually slow, but that slowness is part of what makes it remarkable. A root does not need speed to be powerful. It only needs time, pressure, and steady growth. This happens because roots are not weak threads lying loosely in the ground. They are living, expanding structures. As they thicken, they occupy more space. If that growth happens beneath a hard surface, the material above may begin to crack or shift. A tree is not trying to attack a sidewalk. It is simply continuing to grow in the way roots do. But But from a human point of view, the result can still be costly and frustrating. Roots can also become a problem underground, especially when they encounter pipes. Old pipes, cracked pipes, or weak joints can let small amounts of moisture escape into the soil. To a root, that can be an attractive signal. Water is valuable, and roots naturally grow toward places where it is more available. If a tiny opening already exists, a root may enter it. Once inside, it can continue growing, making the problem worse over time. What began as a small weakness in a pipe can become a blockage, a leak, or a break. Again, the root is not acting with intention in a human sense. It is responding to moisture and opportunity. But this quiet response can have major effects in homes, streets, and city systems. It is a reminder that roots are active participants in the landscape, even when people forget they are there. In gardens and farms, roots can create another kind of difficulty. Plants growing near one another often compete below ground as much as above it. A tree with a large root system may absorb water and nutrients before smaller nearby plants can reach them. A garden bed placed too close to certain shrubs or trees may struggle more than expected, even when it receives sunlight. The competition is hidden, but it is very real. Two plants may look peaceful above the soil, while below it, they are competing for the same limited resources. This hidden competition matters in farming too. Crops growing too closely together may compete through their roots. Weeds can be especially troublesome because they often establish quickly and begin gathering water and nutrients before the crop is fully developed. To the eye, it may seem like a few extra plants in a field, but underground, those roots may already be changing the balance. Some invasive plants become serious problems partly because of the way their underground systems spread. Certain species send out aggressive roots or root-like structures that allow them to move outward and return even after cutting. A plant may appear removed above ground, only to return because its hidden system is still alive below. This can make invasive growth difficult to control. The visible plant is only part of the organism. The real persistence is often underground. Roots can also affect foundations, retaining walls, and other built structures when they grow in tight spaces. Tiny cracks can widen over time. Moisture patterns can change. Soil can shift. Not every root causes damage, and much depends on the kind of plant, the structure nearby, and the condition of the ground. But when root problems do appear, they often reveal something people do not always like to remember. The built world is not separate from the living world. It shares space with it. There is something humbling in that. Humans pour concrete, lay pipes, level ground, and draw property lines. Roots pay little attention to those plans. They follow water, pressure, oxygen, and space. They respond to the world as they find it, not as people intended it to be. That quiet force can feel almost deliberate, even though it is not. A root seems to sense where to go, where to branch, where to thicken, and where to keep pressing forward. And that raises one of the most intriguing questions of all. How much can a root actually sense, adjust, and respond as it grows through the world? Roots do not think the way animals do. They have no brain, no eyes, no nerves, and no thoughts in the human sense. And yet, they are far from passive. A root, is always sensing something. It responds to gravity, moisture, touch, temperature, oxygen, nutrients, and the chemical conditions around it. It changes direction when needed. It branches where opportunities appear. It slows down in some places and becomes more active in others. The more closely scientists study roots, the more they seem like living structures engaged in a constant, quiet conversation with the world. One of the clearest examples is gravity. A root can detect which way is down and grow in that direction. It does not decide this consciously, but its cells respond to the pull of the earth in a reliable way. Moisture matters too. If one part of the soil is wetter than another, roots may grow toward the area where water is more available. This means the root is not simply extending blindly into the ground. It is reacting to information in its environment and changing its growth as a result. Roots also respond to touch. If they meet a stone, hard-packed soil, or another barrier, they may bend, slow, or branch around it. Their growth is flexible. It is not fixed like a machine that can only move one way. The path of a root is shaped moment by moment by what it encounters. That is one reason root systems can look so different even within the same species. The root is always adjusting to the world it actually finds. Nutrients influence root behavior as well. When resources are unevenly spread through the soil, roots may branch more heavily in richer areas. A patch of ground with better access to key nutrients may receive more of the plant's underground investment. In a poorer patch, growth may be slower or less dense. So the root system is not only expanding outward, it is, in a sense, exploring and responding to where the best chances for survival lie. Temperature matters too. Cold soil can reduce root activity. Warmer conditions may encourage faster growth, as long as water is available and temperatures do not become extreme. Oxygen levels are also important. In waterlogged soils, roots may struggle because the air spaces in the ground disappear. Some plants cope by changing how and where their roots grow. All of this shows that a root is sensitive to a wide range of physical and chemical signals, even though it has no awareness in the way animals do. This is where the idea of plant intelligence sometimes enters the conversation. People notice how roots adapt, and they begin to wonder whether a root is in some sense smart. That word can be tempting, but it can also be misleading. If intelligence means human-style thinking, planning, or consciousness, then roots do not have that. But if the word is being used more loosely to describe flexible, responsive behavior shaped by constant feedback, then roots can certainly seem intelligent in that broader sense. What is safest to say is that roots are highly responsive living systems. They gather information through their cells, react through changes in growth, and continually adjust to conditions around them. Their behavior is not random. It is shaped by feedback from the environment. A root system develops through countless small responses, each one adding up over time to a structure that fits the conditions of that plant's life. There is something deeply calming about that kind of responsiveness. Roots are not rushing. They are not forcing the world to obey them. They are listening, in their own biological way, to the ground around them. They find water where they can. They avoid obstacles where they must. They grow more where chances are better. They reduce activity where conditions become harsh. Their way of interacting with the world is slow, patient, and continuous. Scientists study this carefully because it tells us something important about plant life. A plant may appear still from the outside, but inside it, and especially below ground, there is ongoing adjustment all the time. Growth is not just a simple program running in one direction. It is shaped by feedback. The root is always responding to the soil it lives in, and the soil is always responding to the root in return. The deeper we look, the more roots begin to seem like quiet negotiators between plant and planet. They do not command the earth, but they do work with it, sense it, and adapt to it. And when that kind of patient responsiveness is multiplied across forests, grasslands, wetlands, farms, and gardens, the influence of roots becomes enormous. A single root system is easy to overlook. One plant in one patch of soil may not seem especially powerful on its own. But when countless roots spread through a landscape together, they become something much larger. They become part of the living foundation of the earth itself. Beneath forests, meadows, wetlands, gardens, farms, and even city edges, roots help create the conditions that allow life above ground to continue. One of the clearest ways they do this is by supporting plant life from below. Every leaf, stem, flower, and branch depends on some kind of underground support. A meadow full of grasses, a forest full of trees, or a garden full of vegetables may look very different above the surface, but each depends on roots to anchor, absorb, store, and connect. Without those hidden systems, the visible landscape would lose much of what makes it alive. Roots also help shape the structure of soil itself. As they grow, die, and decompose, they leave behind channels, spaces, and organic material that affect how the ground holds together. Some roots move through tiny cracks and loosen compacted soil over time. Others help bind loose particles into more stable forms. When roots decay, they leave passages that water and air can move through. This means soil is not only a background for plant life. It is something roots actively help build and maintain. That matters greatly for water. A healthy rooted landscape does not handle rain the same way bare ground does. When rain falls on soil filled with roots, more of that water may soak in rather than race across the surface. Root channels and healthy soil structure help water move downward. Plant cover slows rainfall as it hits the ground. Together, these effects can reduce runoff, lower erosion, and help keep moisture in the soil where living things can use it. So roots influence not only where plants grow, but also how water moves through the land. They also affect nutrient cycling. When plants take in nutrients through roots, those nutrients become part of leaves, stems, flowers, fruit, and seeds. Later, when those parts fall, decay, or are eaten, the nutrients re-enter the system. Roots participate in this cycle in direct and indirect ways. They absorb minerals, release compounds into the soil, support microbial life, and help create the conditions that allow nutrients to keep moving through ecosystems. In that sense, roots are not only gatherers, they are part of a much wider pattern of exchange. The influence of roots also helps determine which plants can live where. A wetland plant succeeds in part because its roots can handle soaked ground. A grassland survives drought partly because of the kinds of root systems common there. A forest recovers after disturbance because seeds can sprout, roots can regrow, and living root networks can help stabilize the ground. Different landscapes are shaped not just by climate and sunlight, but by the hidden abilities of roots beneath them. This becomes especially clear after disturbance. A fire may pass through a grassland or woodland. Floodwater may rush across a valley. A storm may damage trees or strip away leaves. What happens next depends heavily on what remains below the surface. If roots survive, regrowth may begin quickly. If root systems still hold the soil, erosion may be reduced. If underground life remains active, recovery may be easier. So when people speak about a landscape healing, they are often also speaking, whether they realize it or not, about the strength of roots. Much of what looks stable above ground depends on invisible support below ground. A field that stays fertile, a hillside that holds, a marsh that remains alive, a forest that returns after hardship. All of these rely on structures most people never see. Even in a small backyard garden, healthy growth above often reflects healthy roots below. There is something deeply calming in that idea. The world is held together by more quiet labor than we usually notice. Roots do not ask for attention. They work in darkness, in moisture, in silence, and over long stretches of time. Their influence is patient rather than dramatic. And yet that patience helps shape the very skin of the land. When we look across a landscape, we are really seeing only half of what is there. The visible half catches the light, but the hidden half supports it. Beneath every living scene is another world, woven through the soil in threads, strands, branches, and fine hairs, holding, gathering, and quietly making life possible. And that may be the most beautiful part of roots. They remind us that some of the most important things in nature do their work in silence, hidden from view. By the time we notice a flower, a tree, a garden, or a field, roots have already been at work for a long time. They have searched, absorbed, anchored, stored, partnered, and endured, all without ever entering the light. Long before a leaf unfolds or a stem reaches upward, the hidden work below has already begun. That may be one of the most beautiful things about roots. They remind us that not all important work is visible. A plant may seem still from above, but below the surface there is movement, exchange, adjustment, and support happening all the time. Water enters. Minerals are gathered, signals travel. Fine root hairs press into tiny spaces. Fungi join in quiet partnership. Soil shifts around living structures that keep reaching farther through darkness. Over the course of tonight, roots have slowly changed from something familiar into something far more remarkable. At first, they may have seemed like simple plant parts, little more than anchors in the ground. But the closer they are examined, the more they begin to feel like one of nature's great hidden systems. They sense gravity without a brain. They respond to water, touch, and chemistry without thought in the human sense. They shape the soil around them. They live among fungi, microbes, and tiny animals in one of the busiest hidden environments on Earth. They also reveal how much of life depends on what remains unseen. A plant's visible beauty depends on invisible labor below. Leaves can only rise because roots hold them steady. Flowers can only bloom because roots have helped gather and deliver what the plant needs. Forests stand because roots spread beneath them. Meadows survive because roots hold soil and store strength below the reach of wind and fire. Wetlands, gardens, crop fields, riverbanks, and hillsides all depend in some way on the patient work of roots. That hidden support extends into human life as well. People depend on roots for food, for fertile land, for stable ground, and even for some of the language used to describe identity and belonging. The word root became a symbol for origin, home, and deeper connection, because real roots already carry those meanings in nature. They support what rises above them. They hold on through difficulty. They remain hidden yet essential. There is something comforting in that pattern. So much of the world is built on quiet foundations. We often notice what is bright, loud, or visible first. We see the flower, not the root. The tree, not the hidden spread beneath it. The field, not the threads holding the soil together. But roots invite a different kind of attention. They ask us to remember that stillness is not emptiness, and invisibility is not unimportance. They also offer a gentler picture of strength. In human life, strength is often imagined as something bold or obvious. But roots show another kind of strength. They move slowly. They adapt instead of rushing. They respond to what is there. They enter hard places grain by grain, season by season. Over time, they can hold a tree upright, help shape a hillside, crack stone, survive drought, endure winter, and begin again after damage above the surface. Their strength is patient. Their strength is quiet. Their strength is built through contact, persistence, and time. And perhaps that is why roots feel so fitting for a night like this. They belong to the unseen world. They do their work in darkness, in silence, and in calm. They ask for no attention. Yet they support more life than most of us ever stop to imagine. So tonight, as the surface world grows quieter, it may be soothing to remember that beneath forests, fields, gardens, sidewalks, and roads, roots are still there, reaching slowly into the earth, holding on, gathering what they can, adjusting to stone, water, air, and soil, working with fungi, feeding plants, steadying the land, supporting the living world from below. And while the visible world rests above them, that hidden world remains gently alive, continuing its slow and ancient work beneath the surface.